and welcome to the Dark Side. We are so happy that you join us each week. We are delighted to have you with us. This is Pastor Purple and TC Storm. We are bringing you the news and then our main story. How you doing? Welcome, Mr. Storm. How you doing?
Yeah, man, I'm here.
We're here. All right, let's get ready to discuss some heavy topics. The news has been full this week, as it is every week. Are there any stories you wanted to bring to the front? I have 3, as always, for us today.
No, go with your 3.
Okay, so the first story that we have is the story of Brittany Griner. Have I said that right? Brittany Griner?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the basketball player, the US basketball player, who has been detained in Russia over alleged drug charges. The story isn't getting a high enough profile. It's not getting enough attention. People don't seem to know about it. No one is saying her name. We're not getting protests to free this woman. She has just had the drugs charge extended, so she should have been due to be prosecuted, or the prosecution process to begin, or for her to be released, and instead they extended the process, so she's still locked up. What's troubling is that actually not much is known about how she is doing, where she is being held. Nobody seems to have access to her. No one knows what's happening to this woman. There is an entire human being that is missing, allegedly being charged with possession of cannabis. It boggles the mind that this woman is going through this, and really the world just marches on. It's not boggling because, of course, she's a black woman and she's being detained in Russia. And so as things currently stand, we don't say her name often enough, and there should be a free Brittany Griner campaign, right? That should be what's happening right now. Free Brittany Griner. That's what's happening. The other thing that strikes me about this story that I really wanted to touch on is I was reading some reports about it, and somebody said it's amazing how quickly they presume her guilt, as if these alleged charges aren't trumped up to coincide with a certain activity that Russia's doing. Holding this woman hostage is just part of that process. And so I found that really interesting, that actually a lot of people have presumed her guilt as opposed to presuming her innocence. And again, that's problematic because, of course, you're not being afforded the same justice that everyone else gets. Any thoughts on this story? Free Brittany Griner?
Of course, nobody is interested in this. What they have done is they have said drugs and put up a picture of a black person. Guilt is automatically then, assigned. Whereas that there have been examples of white people going into certain countries and knowingly and willfully, publicly breaking the law. They stated before they departed to go to said countries, of their intentions to break the law. And then when they're arrested, there is an outcry about how these people have been arrested. Okay. So you already have confession of guilt from these people. But you saw the State Department involved. You saw campaigns to get these people removed. You freed. You had news stations carrying the families of these people, making appeals. There's none of that.
No.
So I'm just like, look, this is par for the course. It's to be expected. I don't expect anything better. Yeah.
I also think that it's quite interesting because, when she first got arrested, there was some sort of chatter about how this is a move to blackmail the USA. They're holding someone hostage. And I thought, well, I mean, unless Putin's been hiding under a rock, he's holding hostage the wrong person. The USA don't have a history of caring very much about black women. Therefore, you picked on the wrong woman. I mean, did you think the Black Lives Matter movement would mean that somehow the US government would bend to the will to speak to you about Brittany? I mean, free Brittany Griner is all I can really say about that. But it is quite horrific to think that there is a young woman, a basketball player, top of her game, doing what she's doing, and she's arrested on these alleged charges, and there is no justice for her. There is no campaign to free her. There is nothing happening. Or let me rephrase that. There's lots happening, but it's not getting the mainstream media coverage that it should be getting. So let me rephrase that. There is a lot happening. There are a lot of people who are trying to raise the attention. And if you go looking for it, you can find it. But that's the problem. You actually have to go looking for it. It's not readily available, and it's not everywhere, and we know that when other athletes were in Brazil, even, what is it, a couple of years ago for the Olympics, there was lots of illegal behavior, lots of terrible things were done, and yet I saw their faces plastered everywhere. Yet Brittany Griner, she's sitting languishing somewhere, and the best that you can do is the State Department says, we're working on it, and we're supposed to believe them. I don't know what else to say about that. But there you go. Story number 2. News story number 2 is breaking news. Happened just a few hours ago. Boris Johnson has completely, again, I don't know how to say this, deliberately antagonized humans. Is that the best way of saying this? Because what he's basically done, he's likened the Ukraine war to, and the Ukrainian people fighting for their lives, out putting their lives on the line to try and save their land, their country, their homes from being bombed, etc. He's likened that to Brexit a few years ago. And for those of you that don't remember Brexit was the xenophobic, racist process by which Britain left the European Union, not Europe, they're still there. They're still situated where they are, but left the European Union because they didn't want any more of those people. And by those people, there was a real hate campaign against Polish people, Europeans in general, people of color, to say that they don't want any immigrants coming to their country. So ironically, you would liken a war where people are trying to save their own land from a dictator coming in and taking it, to Brexit, where people voted to leave the European Union. Well, he sparked lots of controversy, of course, and people are insulted and people are angry. But again, he's still Prime Minister, so nobody's putting in a vote of no confidence yet again. Just another day with Boris Johnson. Mr. Storm, any thoughts?
I wouldn't be surprised to see within the next few weeks an increase in hate-related crimes. This comparison, what it does is it sets foreigners up as invaders to the right-wing portion. And I mean the extreme right here, because the right wing voted for Brexit, but there's an extreme portion of that employ violence as a method to achieve their aims and to terrorize people that they don't believe are British. And I use that phrase intentionally because you can be black and be born there for generations and they still won't consider you British. So yes, I wouldn't be surprised to see an uptick in violence, and I think it's intentionally done by Boris, because
he's just invited.
Let's not forget that the police are still investigating his possible law breaking, and they have actually assigned more people to the investigation. Right. So it's funny that Cressida, Dick by name, is out of a job, and then they assign more people to the investigation.
Sure.
whereas before they were claiming they weren't going to investigate it when she was in her position. Okay,
Yes.
so I think that's a interesting fact to bear in mind. Um, but yeah, I think it was done intentionally. I think it was done to rile people up. I think it was done to g up his extremist base
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
support him and his
Mhm.
actions. Um, because I think there's a lot more coming. And I think also what it does, this comparison and putting it out there, and the language that he has used is so that when the blowback comes from them not taking Ukrainian refugees into the UK, it will be, well, we don't know who's coming. We need to vet them. We need to make sure who's coming.
Mm,
We need
mm.
to make sure we take in the right people.
The
And it
right
will be
sort of people. Mhm.
yep, and it will be that kind of language that is used because he's being the ground already.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
sowing the seeds of war,
Yeah. Yeah.
of conflict,
Yeah.
you know, and invaders and all of this. So yeah, that's all that's happening there.
Sowing the seeds of invaders on the backdrop of inviting Ukrainians to continue to apply to come to the UK.
But I
I'm
mean,
not sure that it's safe. I'm not sure it's safe for you in the UK. I don't mean to be rude, but I think we all remember how just a few years ago it wasn't really safe for Polish people and other Europeans to live in the UK because they were receiving so much hate
what are you talking about? It
from.
weren't safe for Ukrainians.
But and now that you're all coming and he's making statements like this, yeah, I do worry, as you say. I think the worry is that there is that extremist base to which he speaks to, which is going to see that as an invitation to take up arms and take back their country, just like the Ukrainians. I don't quite think that's the same thing at all. But okay. I'm sure this
Well,
will
I mean,
rage on.
yeah, I mean, this is slightly off topic, but we're
Mm,
talking about refugees and Ukraine's. But it's interesting that refugees from the Ukraine are passing into the USA through the Mexican border, right? So,
how they get
what,
there?
right? Okay, so they got there with no paperwork.
How they get
But,
how? I
but
can't
here's
get
the
to
thing.
an airport without.
Here's the thing. They managed to cross through numerous lands, cross a body of water, okay, and claim asylum and refugee status in the US, right? They're doing that across the Mexican border, but Mexicans aren't able to do that, right? These people are showing up with no paperwork and being admitted into the US. But people that are my shade and darker cannot do that. I
No.
mean, if I showed up at the border now and said, "Look, my name is Vlad and I'd like to come in," I'm not getting through, right? That's just the bottom line.
Mm,
But also, it's interesting that when this same process is taken by Syrian refugees to cross into European countries, that's not deemed valid because they pass through a number of other countries to get there, that they
mm,
went across the Mediterranean or they went across the English Channel,
mm,
right? So why is it valid for Ukrainians to travel all the way through a number of countries across the Atlantic and then enter a country, pass through that to get into another country? Now, I'm not saying I don't want the Ukrainians to receive refugee status or
mm.
asylum because people fleeing from conflict should be able to find safety and refuge somewhere.
That's right.
My question is, why is it only guaranteed to a certain group?
And again, I think you'll hear us say this quite frequently as we continue these weeks and talk about the war. Two things can be true at the same time. Two things. Ukrainians need help. They are fleeing a war that is unjust. That can be true. And black and brown people are being subjected to racism within the same system that is helping the Ukrainians. And so that unfair treatment can be called out at the same time as the fact that you're helping someone else. Those two don't negate each other. It is possible to be for help for refugees, including Ukrainians, and also say the system is unfair, immoral, not right, downright racist in places. I mean, at best it's problematic. At worst, it is harmful to people who are fleeing conflict to be put through the processes that they're put through. It causes generational trauma onto children, families separated, treated badly through these systems, held in camps. And we've talked about this. We've talked about refugees who are being placed in off-country camps where they're being detained until they can be processed, but nobody can say how they're doing. No one has access to see if these people are all right, if they're being treated well, what's happening, why are they being held in an off-site camp if they have refugee status? What is the issue here? So we've talked about these issues before, and those two things can be true at the same time. And I think that people need to wrestle with that a bit more. You can help somebody and believe in wanting the best for them. And I can also say that it's not right that you don't treat other people in that way and fight for the rights of everyone else as well. It bothers me that people can't hold those two things in their head at the same time and manage a conversation without going and having some kind of breakdown. But anyway, that's just my 2 pennies worth on the end of that point. Next news story before we get to our main item today.
Yeah,
Our final story. Our final story is not one based in the UK then. It's actually one based in Europe, in the Netherlands. It's a slightly more complicated or not complicated story, as the case may be. So basically, some students decide to protest Shell's involvement, Shell's action at their university. So TUI is the university. It's a university in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. There is a student protest happening. During that student protest, the police are called in to remove the students. The students disperse. 3 students are arrested, 2 of which are arrested for refusing to leave. The 3rd student is the one that I want to concentrate on. The 3rd student is actually not arrested for any of that. She's arrested for insulting an officer, according to the police. So that's the quotation. She has been arrested outside of the institution for insulting an officer. And the insult was F the police. Now, it's not clear whether that was just on her shirt or if it was said out loud. There is some argument that it was just something she was wearing, but I don't have the ins and outs of that. What is interesting is that it's an interesting piece of law here in the Netherlands that you cannot say something that harms the reputation or honor of the police or any civil servant. Thank you. But the police are the ones that we're concentrating on because it puts you in direct conflict frequently. There is a direct conflict here. So I can't say anything that would cause you harm or bring dishonor to your role as a police officer. The problem being when I'm protesting and you're being unnecessarily aggressive, and in the Netherlands we've seen that quite a lot, that there has been a lot of aggression towards protesters over the last few years. Shockingly, a lot of Dutch people have found that really shocking that the police have been so actively aggressive. But the protester cannot respond and say anything that would be perceived as causing harm because they will be arrested for insulting the officer. No matter that they're being provoked by the officer, you have to always maintain a sense of grace and dignity about yourself and hold your tongue in the face of whatever's coming at you. Now, by nature, a protest can be filled with conflict because you're not there because everything's going swimmingly. You're there because you're protesting something that you disagree with. So there is a negative element to it anyway. But in this way, you're setting people up for failure. There's also a censorship issue, which worries me a little bit, and a freedom of speech issue that concerns me. Why is it that I have freedom of speech except for, as it pertains to, anyone in the civil service, and particularly a police officer, can arrest me for speaking against them. What happened to freedom of speech? Is that not something that we believe in here? Because they talk about it a lot, but maybe that's not something we have in law, and I haven't been able to dig in and figure it out. So maybe some Dutch people will come along and comment and explain to me how these conflicts work. But I find this quite troubling that you have this situation.
Yeah, look, this for me is definitely an issue of censorship. Um, and I believe that there are constraints on freedom of speech. I don't believe in the model that you have in the USA, where pretty much anything and everything goes. Um, but this is still taking it a step too far. For example, if I have a protest against the police, how then do I voice that displeasure without calling into dispute the reputation of the
Of the
police?
police, right?
Right?
And
It's
we've
not
had reasons in the Netherlands to protest the police. There have been people
right.
who have been killed, treated badly at the hands of the police, and people have wanted to protest. But now I understand where that reluctance comes from, because, as you say, how do you do that?
Yeah. So there's a real there's a real issue with the way that this law is written and enacted. And I understand the principle behind it because there has been an increase in abuse directed towards civil servants, typically teachers, um, first aid workers, people that work in government offices, things like that. And so they want to curb this
Mhm,
the
mhm,
abuse towards them.
mhm.
The problem is that the law as it stands is open to misuse.
Which seems to be the case in this case with
And
the student.
you have a similar problem that you have in the US in that police officers are always believed. There's
Yeah,
an assumption
yeah.
of best behavior
Mhm,
from the police.
mhm.
So when the police set out to antagonize and wind someone up, well, they're able to do so.
Yep,
And the moment you retaliate and say something back to them, like F you, then who ends up in trouble? You
right?
do.
Yeah.
But they are not held to account for the actions that they took prior to that.
Mhm,
The other reason this is a issue of censorship for me is that there is a case where um, someone was arrested and fined for wearing a T-shirt with the acronym ACAB across it.
right.
Okay, and ACAB, for those that don't know, stands for All Cops Are Bastards. Right, but this is just the acronym.
And you have
So,
to know that, like, and I'm sure it
right?
stands for other things in other
But
places.
the thing is, there's the assumption, right? So you're charged and fined on the assumption
Mm,
that that stands for what you are claiming it stands for. It says ACAB. I could say it stands for anything, right? But the fact of the matter is, it's assumed that the police know what they're talking
manipulative.
about,
Mhm,
that they are correct, and so the person was fined for wearing this T-shirt. You know, and so that becomes a real question of censorship. Now you are reading into something
mhm. That isn't
and
even said to
proclaiming it to
you.
be,
Right.
but and your position is being upheld
Mm,
without any evidence to the
mm,
contrary,
mm,
or
mm,
any
mm.
evidence to support your point,
Yeah.
right? As I said, I could say it stands for all cops are bright, all cops are blue. I mean, they wear blue uniforms, you know? So it could stand for a number of things.
All chefs are brilliant.
It could stand for that too.
It could be anything at this point with acronyms, it could be anything. It could
You
be the
know?
name of a company for all I know somewhere.
So
And to be fair, if you didn't know that acronym, I didn't know before you told me that, so I'd see someone wearing that shirt and be like, "Mm, okay." I don't know what it stands for. I'd have to look. I'd have to Google it. Like I wouldn't know what on earth that shirt meant. I wouldn't know.
Yeah, but
I'd be like, it's
police
a new business. What is this?
police know the acronym. People know what they are.
Well, anyway, I think it's an interesting point, and I think it's something that we do need to be mindful of and keep an eye on. That story was actually sent to us by a viewer, so thank you very much for sending that in. It's something that we will keep an eye on, something that we will keep you updated with here in the Netherlands. You know, the student in question, we hope that all is well with that student. I can't imagine being at a university wanting to protest something. And I remember university days. I remember we protested pretty much everything. And then being arrested for mouthing off outside of the building. It seems unbelievable that you would then have that, you know, held against you in some criminal way. It's not like she threw a brick through a window, you know. It just criminal damage. I kind of understand this. I'm like, police, it, you know, the thing is, you asked me a question when we were talking about this story. You said, I'm a former teacher, so you said, as a teacher, what would you expect? And I said, I would like to be kept safe at work. Like, I have the right to have a safe workplace, in as much as that means I do not want to be abused in my workspace.
Mhm.
The difference is I'm a teacher. I'm there to do my job, and I've had irate parents and we've had irate kids. You know, I've had kids do the threatening thing, but we have a recourse to actually have that child or those parents removed from the situation, allow them the time to calm down, process. And then if there is a legitimate complaint, of course, being made against you as a teacher, there is a process by which that goes through. It beggars belief that police who are naturally going to be in conflict situations, you are there by definition to be in spaces in which conflict is your primary problem. You know, criminal activity is a conflict issue. Removing protesters and doing things, it's a conflict job. The fact that safeguarding will look different for you than it will look for a teacher or a, you know, an office worker in the tax office or what have you. I can't believe that you can't reckon with that. Like, you can't manage to work out that there is going to be a level of aggression, and therefore I need to be able to develop systems and mechanisms to keep myself safe, to keep other officers safe, but also to keep the public safe. And somebody mouthing off is certainly not.
See,
I would expect that's part of the territory. Like, that's just part of the conflict that you have to deal with as a police officer. You know, I mean, yes, if you were dealing with only polite criminals, well, then maybe you wouldn't have a job. I'm just saying, like, it's not a job that you go into knowing that you're going to work with the nice people and the polite people. You
well,
know you're going into a conflict situation.
I think the problem is that there is no restrictions placed or context placed in the application of this law.
Mm,
So, for example, if a police officer is, say, you've been speeding and the police officer writes you a ticket and you start mouthing off and they arrest you, well, fair enough. You know, as far as I'm concerned, that's a legitimate application of the law.
mm,
But when you walk into a conflict situation like a protest, there has to be some leeway given for the freedom of speech and expression. And the fact that the law isn't written to allow for that allows for the misuse of it.
yeah,
And that for me is the biggest problem. I don't have a problem necessarily with the law existing because I believe, and said there are statistics to show the increase in abuse, right?
absolutely. But
But,
I think there has to be discernment. Where is the common sense
yeah,
application here? Of course, if you're working in the police front office or, you know, as a secretary, and people come up to you and start abusing you because you work in the building, that's wrong. You know, if people start with, who do you work for? Oh, I work for the National Police Service, and somebody starts abusing you as a result of that, that's ridiculous. If you work as a civil servant in teaching or nursing or whatever the practice is in which you work, you should have a safe environment. But it seems to me that a police officer on the ground going in to deal with criminals or protesters or conflict, that's the nature of your job. There, it seems counterintuitive to arrest everybody who says something to you that you don't like. Like,
Yeah, well,
why
see,
are you doing this job?
but I think what you're seeing here, and this is something that is happening globally, right?
Mm,
Is that legislations, legislation and governments are shifting more to the right as the
mm.
populace shifts more to the left,
Okay,
right?
okay,
So
okay.
I think we may have gone into a show before about the politics of the UK and how the majority of the population is
Vote.
left leaning
Mhm,
and have been, I mean,
mhm.
for
Decades.
decades.
Yeah.
I'm talking about going back 80 years or so. Um, most of the British population have voted for a left leaning party, but the way the system is designed, you end up with a right
Yeah, yeah.
leaning party, okay, most of the time.
Mhm,
So you see that in pretty much most of the Western countries going, that
mhm,
the legislation and the laws coming out of them, because you even look at European countries who've got this here, the British legislation, but you go further into Eastern Europe and you see the issues that are going on with the legislation there. The
mhm,
legislation is shifting more and more to the right, but the populace are moving more and more to the left. And what that does is it creates that conflict,
mm,
but also it leaves those that are currently in control because the legislation is designed to keep them in control. And they do this intentionally because they know that there is a cultural shift happening. And if
mm,
they don't
mm,
address it,
mm.
then they're going to find themselves out of power.
Well, I'm sure that our viewers will have lots more questions and lots more news stories that they'll want to share. If you do, please do send them to us. You can contact us through whichever medium you're watching us through, or if you know us personally, then of course, then send them along to us personally. I want to get to today's main topic. I want to give it its full attention. It's one that does not sit easy. I got through half of the report before I could cope. Um, Basically, today's topic is child Q. For those of you that don't know, there was a report released this week. It was published by Hackney Council, and it revealed that in 2020, a 15-year-old black girl at Hackney Secondary School was strip searched while on her period over unfounded suspicions that she was in possession of cannabis. The young girl was made to bend over naked, spread her legs, and use her hands to spread her buttocks while coughing. This was all done on the basis of smelt cannabis. It was done with 2 police officers that were present during the search, and the teachers were standing outside the room. The girl's mother was not notified. There was no one present to be on her side, to advise her, to look after her, nothing. This was done as she was actually in exam period. She was pulled out of an exam and taken to this room and then was assaulted in this way. The news stories are the reports is there. If you want to read it, you can find it quite easily. I will say for anyone who cries, have a box of tissues ready. It makes for horrible reading. She is not the only young person to have gone through this. The report highlights that this has happened 25 times in the borough. Of those 25 times, 23, is that correct, Mr. Storm? 23?
Mhm.
There was no reason. It was unfounded. There was no reason. And the young people in question were assaulted for no reason whatsoever. I use the word assault deliberately. I use that on the basis that the Met Police themselves say that if there is no due process, if the process isn't followed, if the uh, if there is unfounded allegations, if there was no due process given, then what you are doing is assaulting someone without reason, without cause. And so that's on their own information. I think just anyone reading and listening to the account will say that that's assault. You can't I mean, to physically violate a 15-year-old girl in that way when she's at school, add to that she was on her periods, add to that she was sitting exams, add to that all of the things that was happening to this young girl, and I just can't believe what's happening. In her own words, she says, let me get the quotes. Where is the quote? I want to quote what she actually says. Oh, where is it? I had it highlighted. Oh, it's gone. Where have I put this thing? Oh, I really wanted to read her own words, but I don't have it with me. In effect, she says that she was made to feel unsafe, that she was removed from an environment in which she was supposed to be safe, where she was supposed to be protected, and every day she wakes up and she feels like screaming. She went from being an A-grade student to needing the care of counselors. She's unable to attend school in the same way, and of course has been suffering ever since. It's a hard story to read. One of the comments that's been made frequently, and there have been protests over the weekend. The school itself had a
Sorry,
turnout.
do you want the exact quote from her?
I would like the exact quote. I really would like to hear her words just because it was
Okay.
so important.
So she says, someone walked into the school where I was supposed to feel safe, took me away from the people who were supposed to protect me, and stripped me naked while on my period. On top of preparing for the most important exams of my life, I can't go a single day without wanting to scream, shout, cry, or just give up. I feel like I'm locked in a box and no one can see or cares that I just want to go back to feeling safe again. My box is collapsing around me and no one wants to help. I don't know if I'm going to feel normal again. I don't know how long it will take to repair my box. But I do know this can't happen to anyone ever again. All the people that allowed this to happen need to be held responsible. I was held responsible for a smell, but I'm just a child. The main thing I need is space and time to understand what has happened to me and exactly how I feel about it and getting past this exam season. I need to know that the people who have done this to me can't do it to anyone else ever again. In fact, so no one else can do this to any other child in their care. Things need to change with all organizations involved. Even I can see that.
I hope that everyone can understand why I wanted her words to stand. I think she very eloquently puts the situation as clearly as it can be. It should never happen again. And that's really the only answer here. It can never happen again. A 15-year-old child should not ever be subjected to that. Full stop. One of the things that has been talked about is adultification bias, where young black, where children, where black and brown children are viewed as adults before they're viewed as children. What I want to point out here is I think that while that is true, there is an adultification, there is a criminalization that happens. And I think it's a dehumanization. Adults are not treated in that way. Which adult expects that you smell something on me? You then have a right to remove me from a situation in which I'm supposed to be safe and violate my rights in that way. And that's adultification. No, that's criminalization and it's dehumanization. This child is being dehumanized. She's being treated as less than human. There is not an adult woman on earth who wants to accept that kind of, that's not treatment we would want. And the only women that are treated that way are ones that have been dehumanized. So for me, when people talk about the adultification of Black and brown children, I understand what they're saying. There's a wider historical context to that. And you're absolutely right that when people look at my 4-year-old, they think she's 6. When they look at my 10-year-old, they're assuming he's 13, 14. You're automatically adding years onto this child. When you're seeing my 15-year-old, and I've got a quote here from a barrister, Helena Kennedy, who talks about, there's a book that she's written from 1993, and she talks about the fact that girls, because they had shapely bodies as young Black girls, were being treated as women because of their body structure. They were being viewed and treated just because of the way they physically appeared as women because, well, look at the body on her. It's the fact that you are only judging a girl on her body tells me that you don't even see that child as human. You're not judging her by human standards. You're actually reducing her to a physical object and then abusing her. That's what you're doing. It is what it is. And when people talk about adultification, it makes my blood boil, because I'm an adult. I'm an adult. You're not going to do that to me. It's not adultification. It's criminalization and dehumanization. You shouldn't do that to anyone, much less do that to a child. You had no grounds to do what you did, and what you did was an assault. Punt. Full stop. It's my Dutch coming out. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know that you have a lot more points to make, and I'm going to recover from the statement.
Right. So I guess the first thing for me to say is she should have been a cat.
She should have been a what?
Cat.
Did you say a cat?
Mm.
Okay. I mean, what?
She should have been a cat.
Okay, I'm tired, so I've got a headache. Please, just make your point.
Think back to the news story about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, I see. Where the cat was removed because everybody got outcry over the
Think about it. The cat was talked about in the Houses of Parliament. The
Yeah,
cat
this young girl is
was
not.
all over the news. You couldn't go through a news cycle without hearing about it. She should have been a cat. Right?
Okay, you're not helping my conversations. Anyway, continue on.
I'm just saying she would have had it a lot better had she just been a cat.
Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate that.
As for Daniel's statement, listen, Daniel, the words of NWA are not a hymn. They are a creed by which to live.
Oh, those of you who haven't seen that comment, let me put that up there.
Right? I'm just putting it out there. So look, there's a lot of things that are going on in this story, and I don't think even in your retelling of it, I don't think it actually manages to convey the true horror of what this girl went through.
You can't convey the true horror. When you it's impossible to say it out loud. You reading the statement makes me cry. It's horrific.
Yeah, look, but I think there are details that need to be added onto this so that people can truly understand what was happening. She was on her period. She was made to remove her sanitary pad, right? And instead of allowing her, after they found nothing on her, instead of allowing her, as she requested, to go to the toilets, bathroom, in order to clean herself up, they made her put on the dirty sanitary pad and walk straight back into that exam room. Now that is unhygienic, first of all, but the trauma you must feel at that unclean feeling that you must then have, and then being told, go back into this pressure situation that can have an impact on the rest of your life and perform to a high standard. The stress and trauma that must have placed on her right? So, you spoke of the fact that in this borough of Hackney that there were 25. So there were 25 searches like this, intimate searches like this,
On
on
minors.
children under the age of 18,
Mhm,
right? And you said that in 23 there was nothing found.
mhm. No,
Right. It's not that in 23 of them nothing was found. It's that 23 of the 25 were black or of an ethnic minority,
oh, that's what it was. Sorry, I apologize. Yes. Well, still,
right?
but there's still the statistic is still the same, isn't it?
No, because it's similar statistics. On the majority, nothing was found,
Right. I
right?
think it was 21.
Yeah,
Nothing was
it's
found.
something like that, 21
Right.
or
I mean, you're not
24 or something like that. Sorry, 22, 21, 22, something, nothing was found. But the
equal numbers
majority
of
of
black people.
these dehumanizing encounters that happen between police and children are happening to children of color, right? So we're talking about 8% of these searches are happening to people that are white. Now, bear in mind, I could understand that if you were talking about, hey, in Nigeria, 8% of these searches were happening to people that were white. Those sort of figures would make sense to me,
It's not a large white population, but
right?
in a country where what is it? How much percentage do we actually make up?
The people, well, the ethnic minorities, minority groupings, I think make up about 14, 15%
And of
of
that, the
the
black
country.
percentage is 8. It's the other way around.
Yeah,
Take the
right.
absolute piss.
How do we impress upon the MP that this is unacceptable? Listen, I don't think the issue so much is the MP as the issue is the PM, right? You got to understand that the PM, despite what he says, you have to look at his earlier statements in which he is calling or conflating Brexit with the war in Ukraine. And that he is actually calling for these sort of actions to be happening to people of color and minorities,
Mhm, mhm.
right? He's not calling for a civil treatment of minorities. He's calling for the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So, um, I have read the whole report. It's only about 36 pages, I think it was.
I got halfway through before I felt sick.
Yeah.
I couldn't barely finish.
And so it's not too much reading, and you know it's worth reading. But I mean I've made some notes on the report and some of the findings and conclusions of it. Um, I think the report in some places is actually quite well written. Some
Mhm,
of the phrases that they use actually are I actually really like. So they one of the things that they do, and I probably need to try and incorporate this into my vocabulary, is that they don't call what we traditionally call um, people of color minorities. The report actually refers to it as world ethnic majority,
yes. Yes.
right?
I've been
Uh,
trying to incorporate that in my speech for a very long time. That is to show you how difficult it is living in European countries and how much the colonialization sits in our heads. We are world majority populations. We are not minorities.
well, I think it's a bit more than just the colonialization. It's about trying to have everyone understand the terms of reference,
Yeah, absolutely.
um, and the average person in the street is not trying to take on these terms of reference. Um,
No, but I am trying to take on those.
yeah,
And when
yeah,
you are, the point I'm making is when you are trying to take on those points of reference, it takes an awful lot of thought to overcome the indoctrination that you've received over a
mhm,
lifetime of education, media, etc., to refer to your own people as world majority populations. It it takes a while, and even I struggle with that. But
yeah,
anyway, that was just an aside on the point of that's really great that that report says that. It's quite shocking, actually.
yeah. Yeah, so as I said, it's quite interesting. Um, so some of the things that come out of the report, one of the things that really come out of the report is how callous and insensitive the staff are in this. So they
Callous and insensitive, or just persistent in their evil? Because it
well,
seemed to me, as I was reading, that they had singled this girl out and had targeted her over time.
no, so absolutely. It does seem to indicate that you get that sort of feeling
Right.
that because what they talk about is the girl was doing well, she was top of her class, she was a prefect at one point,
Mhm.
and then something seems to have shifted. And so even when reading the report, there seems to be some indication. And I think that even when you read some of the stuff that happens, what happens to her on this day certainly seems to indicate a sense of vindictiveness of
Yeah,
what's going on.
yeah.
But the reason why I say the callous and insensitivity of the staff is because they were asked by the committee that were commissioned to do this report. You know, they were interviewed, and some of the statements that came out of it, I'm gonna read some to you. Right, so this is one of the statements that one of the staff involved made, not the police, the staff. So the teachers, the people responsible for looking after her. This is the hardest thing we've had to go through, and for anyone to think that the school might be complicit is very stressful and difficult to deal with.
I'm sorry, what? I'm sure it is stressful and difficult to deal with the reality of the evil that you did to this child. What are you saying? I'm sure you are experiencing some difficult times. Is your
Mhm,
conscience prickling you now that you're being investigated? Like, what are you talking about? You think it's difficult being you? Try being the child that was abused by
mhm,
your hands at your request without her. Sorry, I'm supposed to be professional. I apologize.
right? In hindsight, this is another staff member. In hindsight, I put my trust in the law. I know now that I need to understand the law better. For example, insisting on staying with a student at all times.
That's nonsense. That's utter trash. Whoever wrote that, utter trash. As a teacher, you have a responsibility to understand and keep your students safe. As a teacher, you are not supposed to go call the police for no good earthly reason. That is not within your jurisdiction. Which head teacher is sanctioning that kind of behavior? We were held to us that the only time we have to call social services, in fact, is when we think that the child is at risk, danger, their life might be on the line, they may be abused. Why are you calling the police on a child over smelling cannabis? What are you talking about?
Right.
You should be checking the.
And this
This
next
whole case
statement is
makes me
going to
so
tell
upset.
you why I think it sounds vindictive. The treatment that she was going through was vindictive, and they had singled
This is
her out.
upsetting.
So this is a statement by another statement by one of the teachers. In my experience with police, and this was at this teacher's previous school, okay, where there has been a suspicion of carrying drugs or a weapon, and police found it necessary to conduct a search, it would only be a pat down. I have known drugs to be found in socks or a waistband, as I have witnessed that before twice in my career. I have never known any more than that on site or known a student to be taken off site. Now, that's a quote by one of the staff involved. And this is why I say it sounds vindictive.
It's vindictive because didn't they pat this girl down?
Exactly.
So you
Oh,
patted her down, you found nothing, and then you called the police because you're
right.
out of order. You are
So the
out of order
same
and you need to
actions
lose your
you
job.
took
You need to
of
lose
this
your job.
girl,
You are incapable of doing
you
it.
claim that the police would have done exactly the same thing. So why were you expecting a different outcome?
Why the police come to do, it beggars belief that the police walked into that situation and thought this was an appropriate course of action. That
We're
absolutely
going to come
beggars
to that.
belief.
We're going to come to them.
You should have known better. From the time you got called in, you should have been like, where's the child's mother? This is an internal issue. Get the head teacher, get the child's mother, deal with the situation. Y'all deal with that. That should have been the police response. The fact as a teacher, you thought that appropriate. Your life is not in danger from smelling cannabis. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? No one's life was in danger here. This was not a life or death situation. You were not suspecting this child of being abused, of nothing. You went out of your way to violate this child's rights. Not one of you called her parents. Not one of you bothered to inform. She had to go home, tell her mother, relive the horror of what she had been through without warning to her mother of what had been happened. The mother never got called by you. You never said nothing. How dare you? Thing upset me.
Right. So, look, as I said, for me, that, as I said, as you point out, it just sounds vindictive. The police are going to do something that you've already done. So why are you including the police? If not to criminalize the child. This, as you said in the beginning, this isn't about adultification.
No. It's about
Right? This is about
criminalizing
the
that child,
criminalization
dehumanizing
of
her.
that child. Because the police, you've already done what you claim you expect the police to do. You found nothing. So therefore, there is no reason to involve the police. Right? Unless you are expecting a different outcome. Okay? So,
And no teacher can get away with saying, and this is something I want to stress, we've had 2 years and more, although this happened in 2020, we've had more years of teachers having education around issues to do with anti-racism work. Pure education has gone into this for teachers to understand that when you call the police on a black student, you are putting their life on the line, be that physically ending their life or having the student violated. The fact that you did nothing that you were supposed to, calling her parents, notifying social
okay, so we're going to come
services.
into that. We're going to come into that because actually there is no legal requirement to notify her parents, which is problematic, and the report actually makes recommendations on this.
She's 15.
Yeah, but there is still no legal requirement. Yeah,
There's
problematic.
no legal requirement to notify your parent. And even if there is no legal
Problematic.
requirement, what is wrong with you? You don't call someone's mother.
Right. Okay.
Me.
Um,
Call parents for less, you know. Can I just say, former teacher of teenagers, I've
as I
called
said,
parents for
for
less.
me, this is
That's
one
a
of the
whole mess
issues.
right there.
This is one of the
No
issues.
duty of care that you had that you couldn't call someone's parent.
Listen, you forget your homework, they calling your parents, right?
Like I said, I've called parents for less, right?
Okay. So this is another concern of mine, actually. So there was a study done 2015, and what it says is that there's an alarming increase in the number of children
Right.
being strip searched by police.
Yeah.
Right. It also highlighted that in 45% of strip searches of children, no appropriate adult was present.
Why is
Now, these
Are we just saying that they're
statistics,
like just pedophiles going around abusing kids? This is because at this point, that's all my conclusion is.
right, but you're hitting the nail on the head right there, because there has been a stark increase in the number of charges of possession of child pornography, pedophilia,
Right,
sexual abuse
right,
of women and girls that
right.
have come against the police in
Police,
Britain and the UK in recent years.
right.
But you're
And then
seeing
you're
this at
telling
the
me at the
same
same time,
time
right,
as an increase in the
right.
strip searching of children.
Can't tell me those two things are mutually exclusive.
Now, look,
They're not mutually exclusive. More police are getting charged with possession of pornography. More children are getting strip searched without an
look,
appropriate adult present.
I'm not saying it's impossible for the two things to not be connected. What I am saying is that it's highly improbable that they're not connected,
There's a problem.
right? And so we need to address the fact that this is happening, and this is troubling, and this is worrying. And if the statistics are borne out that it is overwhelmingly minority or people from world majority groups that are being affected by this, what you are actually seeing and dealing with is a long-standing problem, which is the fetishization of women of color,
Children.
right?
Just
Well,
let's go back to the
okay,
fact.
let's be like this.
Children.
Children of color, women of color, females of color. Okay? Because as I said, I think you're going to find that if we were to actually look at the statistics on strip searches of adult, I'd
Well, those
probably
have
I'd
increased as
probably
well, yes.
I'd probably have a
Naked
guess.
money on, yeah.
I haven't done the research, but I'm willing to stake a wager on the fact that it's going to overwhelmingly affect those from the global majority, ethnic majorities. So, yeah, this is another. As I said, this is one of the worrying things that of the report that came out, and actually, I think more work needs to be done on this aspect. So, there is a process. So you spoke about the process that police are meant to go through
Yes.
before they conduct a search like this on a minor, and if they don't, then what you're dealing with is technically an abuse. Um, the process was ignored. So what you were dealing with is some junior police officers, and by junior, I mean in terms of rank, not
Ranking.
necessarily how long they were in service for. And we don't have this information. And when you look at this it was because it was difficult for the committee to get details of the officers involved. So
I'm
even though
sorry,
you
what now?
right, so there's a whole issue with trying to get information on just who was involved in this. The police weren't giving up this information.
Excuse me? We're doing an investigation. Rank and file. Name,
Right,
number, rank, file.
right.
What are you talking about?
So in order for something like this to occur, there's a whole process that has to go through. And one of those stages is that this must be, they need to get permission for this from a superior officer. So somebody high ranking has to give permission for this search to go ahead. That was never done. There was, as far as the commission can find, there is no evidence to show that any attempt was made to speak with the superior officer. Right?
Which comes to the question that Daniel has placed in here, which is why is the police force a comfortable place for those who fetishize children? Because apparently you don't need to follow procedure. Let's be real about this. You have access, you have opportunity, you have authority, and apparently, even though there are rules, you don't need to follow them because when an investigation is done into you, you don't have to comply. So of course it's going to be a comfortable hiding place. Of course it's going to be a place where people seek to hide
Listen,
because they have the authority, they have the rights to do things, and when they go and do things that break their own rules and codes, they are not held accountable, they are not investigated, and the police force itself refuses to cooperate to out those that do this.
I think that's a large part. I think there's a deeper, more fundamental reason for this, and I would say it's the same reason that those that fetishize children go to church, and that is that there is a desire by the community to see the best in the police, and there is a desire within churches to see the best in their community. And because of that, it makes it easy or easier for predators to hide in the midst of their prey. And I think these are overlapping factors that you see between why you find racists and pedophiles in the police force, and why you find them in churches.
Okay, back to child Q.
Is Daniel telling me to be quiet?
No, I think Daniel's just letting us know that, you're letting out you're telling the truth.
Well, I'm like,
People.
Daniel knows me better than that. I ain't going to hold my mouth. If I got something to say, I'm going to say it. So, yeah, back to the procedure. What the report also highlights is that after the child was strip searched, there was a lack of care given. Okay. And what they talk about is exactly that, not just the criminalization of the child, but actually that the child is seen as the risk rather than being at risk.
Right.
Right. And that is where, you have the real issue of Black people being seen as a threat. So, in essence, what they saw was this girl was a threat, was the risk that they were taking, rather than her actually being the victim in the situation. So, yeah, I have to say this is something I think that we've spoken on before about the fact that Black people are being seen as threats, and also it's all overlapping with the adultification of children, because if she was seen as a child, you wouldn't see her as a risk. She would be seen as innocent. She would be, presumed as not being a threat or a risk, or not being a danger to you.
If she was a 15-year-old blonde girl, let's just call a spade, would you have thought of her in those terms?
Hmm.
And immediately I can hear in my head somebody say, yeah, but we don't see color. That's nonsense, because the truth is very different. What people live through, what this child lived through, is very different to what you are saying with your nonsense about we don't see color.
Listen,
Because quite frankly, the 15-year-old child was being abused by those who were supposed to keep her safe. But if she was a 15-year-old blonde girl, would you have seen her in that way?
listen, all I'm going to say
Well,
is, for
police.
anyone that says they don't see color, yeah, come let me kick in your door, rob your house, and then when the police come, describe me to the police and not tell them what color I am. Yeah? Don't talk to me about you don't see color, because you ain't colorblind. If you're colorblind, I'll give you a bly. You get a pass. But don't talk to me about that nonsense about you don't see color, because you do see color, and you see it when you're good and ready to. So just leave that nonsense out, right? Because I'm not here for that foolishness.
Yeah.
Right? So, and what they say is, so the teachers in the story, what the teachers do is that they say they smell cannabis on this girl. Okay. And they try to use the context or the pretext. The word I want is pretext, not context. Anyway, so they use the pretext of, oh, we're concerned about this girl. Okay. We smell cannabis on her, that she might be being exploited because somebody that she was friends with had previously been kicked out of the school for having cannabis on them or drugs on them. Pardon me. Okay, so if you were concerned about the exploitation of this girl, what another point that the highlight reports, sorry, that the report highlights, is that this was not furthered up the chain for child safety,
Nope.
right? It
Like
wasn't
I said, we have a
reported
whole
on,
process.
right? So if you were concerned about exploitation, there's a reporting process and
Mhm,
procedure that you're
mhm,
meant to follow, but the
mhm.
school never followed that,
No.
right? So you're not truly concerned about her being exploited, because if you were, you had statutory
Responsibility.
obligations to
Right,
fulfill that
right,
you never did.
right. Never Didn't once. Call police. Didn't call social services. Didn't follow the chain of
Okay.
command. Didn't do any of that. No, we're not following those.
Now,
Going
here's
to our
the
head of
thing.
department, going to the head teacher, going to the head of year, filling in the reports that you have to fill in, notifying the services that you have to fill. You didn't do any of that? No?
Right?
Don't think you're that concerned with her safety.
Right. So here's the thing. You cannot walk anywhere in that area of London without smelling weed. You can barely get on a bus in that area of London and not, especially if it's a double decker, and not have somebody smoking weed, right? She going to school. She could have just gotten on a bus and she gonna come off the bus with a contact high and stinking of weed, right?
Okay.
That's
All right,
that's just
let's
the
not
reality.
oversell the point. It's my area. It's where I grew up, right? Let's not oversell the point.
I'm just saying,
Listen, I managed to get to school just fine using all of those services without smelling of weed. Your point is well made, though, that there is usage of weed in the borough. It's well known. It could have come from anywhere.
right. Now, the reason I'm making this point is because she had shown up to school once before smelling of weed and she was looking unkept. And the school called her mother.
According to them.
But okay, according to them. The point I'm making is that the school called her mother, right? And they said to the mother, this is what the scenario is. And the mother said to her, the reason why she looks so disheveled is because she was up late studying, right? The school then says to the mother, well, if she comes to school smelling of weed again, then we're kicking her out.
But you didn't even do that procedure either.
Right. So here's the thing. She
So you'll
shows up.
tell me your procedure, but you don't even do that.
She shows up smelling of weed. You search her, you find no weed. Right? You call the police on her. The police strip search her, find no weed. But you still don't call her mother to tell her, one, she came to school smelling of weed. We said we're going to kick her out. Let's have a conversation about that. And the reason why you probably didn't call her mother is because you probably have to tell her mother that her daughter was strip searched by the police. And you don't want to do that.
Every level it's not even that they failed this girl. In every level, they abused this child. On every level. Daniel's making a point which I really want to highlight here because I think this is a really important point. It's happened in the US already and it will happen in other places. Eventually, they will legalize the weed and then act like nothing's happened. No restitution will be made to those who the system abused prior to that point. They don't go back and release people from prison, expunge people's blah, 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 allow people the opportunity. Now that it's legal, we just move on and act like no community has ever been harmed through the criminalization of weed. And that is a problem. That's a real genuine problem because in this case, you've gone out of your way to criminalize and dehumanize this child. And then when it all becomes legal and we're all moving on, who go back to say sorry? Because not even a sorry will come.
I'm just going to say this. Yeah, they legalize weed in the States, but they're still finding a way to criminalize black people for smoking it. Yeah.
Right. It's the same thing.
And you're going to have the same thing here.
Son, I hear you. The levels of horror that they put, I'm mad on her behalf. Listen, you everyone's seen me almost reduce to tears in this whole hour. So, I hear you.
We're talking about the procedures, right? So now the school failed in that. Now the police, as I said, they were meant to get permission from a higher officer in order for such a search to take place, right?
But aren't they meant to inform a parent?
No.
A legal guardian? Police?
No.
But if the police want to strip search my child, don't they have to inform the child?
No. This is one of the problems and the failings that the report highlights, right? But
I don't understand. They can't talk to a minor without an adult present, but you can strip search a minor without an adult present? No, I'm seriously, I'm confused. I'm actually genuinely confused. You can't talk to my child without calling me and
No,
ensuring that
but
I
they
have
can.
either their legal
Pace
representation or me.
but they can engage. They can search a child without your parent present. There are situations. As I said, the PACE legislation allows for them to search your child.
No, this don't make
Um,
no sense.
Look, no, but you see, when you start getting into in-depth searches like this, then it becomes a whole different matter because they're meant to have a responsible adult present, and that's not the police. So one of the teachers should have been in the room, or her parent should have been in the room, or someone like a social worker or someone that's an advocate for that child should have been in the room.
Well, the teachers couldn't be trusted, so they were standing on the outside of the door. We know that.
Right.
But
So there's a whole question of trust of the teachers, whether they could be trusted. But the teachers are saying that at no point were they told
yes.
that a strip search was going to take place. Now I'm
What do you
like,
think they were standing outside the door for?
listen. But my thing is this: whether you were told or not, your behavior shows me that you would have acquiesced to anything that the police said anyway. So that makes no difference whether they told you or not, but they were still meant to. And there are
This is
forms,
really, this area of law is not making no sense to me. But
right?
go on.
But there were forms also that had to have been filled out to say, so if the child didn't want the responsible adult present,
Right.
then and the responsible adult agreed to that, there are forms that are meant to be filled out before that search can take place. Those forms were never done.
I'm so confused. I am
Right.
so confused by this area of law. How are
Right.
you telling me that my child, who, if anything, you suspect anything I do to that child, you go hold, or that child does something, I get held accountable for. But you can do anything to my child and nobody is held accountable. I'm not called how is that not a legal responsibility? So I have a legal responsibility to take ownership and responsibility for anything this child does, because we've covered this before on the dark side. If my child at 15 goes off and does something, I'm criminally liable for their actions. That's what they wanted to bring in under law. Okay, but you can come in and so you're calling me for that, right? But you want to come in, abuse my kid, and nobody has a responsibility to call me. Nobody. There is no one, no police, no social services, no school. Nobody has a responsibility to call me as a parent and tell me that you, or ask my permission, or immediately demand I come and be at the school with my nothing. You know how to do nothing?
Not really,
No,
no.
you'll need to burn for that. Sorry, that's
So, but here's the thing. So the school smells cannabis on this girl, right? So we're talking about the procedures.
Allegedly. Because at this point,
Yeah,
I don't believe
okay.
they smell anything.
Look, here's the thing. Whether they did or didn't, it makes no difference because they failed. Everything. Look, okay, so the
But
reason
that does
why I
make
say
a difference because
no,
you're saying it.
no, I'm gonna
No,
explain
because
to
it's a
why I'm gonna
presumption of
explain to you
guilt.
why it doesn't matter. I'm gonna explain to you why it doesn't matter, right? Because you can say, and whether she did or didn't, as I said, there's legitimate reasons for why she could have smelled of cannabis through no fault of her own, right? And that is even upheld. So the IOPC, that's the Independent Office of Police Complaints in the UK, right? What they upheld a complaint against the police, and what they stated in upholding the complaint is, and I quote, the use of the smell of cannabis as a single ground is not good practice as set out in the College of Policing's authorized professional practice on stop and search. End quote. Right? So this is why I'm saying to you, it doesn't matter whether she smelt of cannabis or not. The grounds, smelling of cannabis in and of itself is not grounds for stopping and searching someone. So she could
Let
have
alone strip searching someone, can
right?
we say? Because
So
stop and
she could
search
have
does not
straight
involve
up
strip search.
smelt of a cannabis farm, right? I'm like, she could have smelt of it so strong that she walked past you and you get a contact high. That in itself is not grounds for the police to stop and search her. right? So there's a failing of the police. So the
And
school
stop and
goes,
search is not the same as strip search.
no, it's
You
not.
see what I
But
mean?
my point is,
Strip search is even worse. So
right,
you can't even get a stop and search on that, but you wanted to strip search this girl. Like, what the hell is wrong with you?
right. So the police, the school, okay, so the school, they failed, but shouldn't, they might not be aware of the codes and practices and the law,
The police should
right?
be,
But the police should be. So
because you
when they
can't
were
stop and
called
search
into
the
this
place.
situation, the police should have said,
No,
no,
brethren.
this isn't grounds enough for us to do this,
Anything.
right?
Not even
Now,
a pat
the
down.
officers, let's say the officers that were present didn't know this. Had they followed the procedure and run it up to a superior officer, maybe they would have been given the correct information to say, no, this isn't grounds for you to do this. Right? So it's failing after failing after failing after failing that is taking place here in every single institution involved in the welfare of this child.
I don't know how that mother's coping. I really don't. I don't know how the child is coping. I don't know how the mother's coping.
Well, the child isn't coping.
Believe. No, we read the statement of the child. The child is not
Right.
coping.
But there's something else that hasn't been reported in her statement, or that she didn't say in the statement, and it's a statement made by her mother and her aunt. And that is the trauma that this child experiences and the triggers, how triggering it is. So when she's out in public and she sees a police officer, she starts screaming and panicking and running
Oh no, and police officers
because
are a
she sees
nightmare.
the police and it
Oh God.
triggers her.
Oh God. She can't go in public because so I just want to just stress and emphasize the reason for my rocking backwards and forwards and holding my head, because I immediately started to rock. Okay. I know that area, right? I grew up in the area that we're talking about. This is not a foreign area to me. This is literally my home borough. This is where I grew up. I know that if you see a police officer and you start screaming and running the other direction, they're going to chase you down and they're going to arrest you and they're going to search you again. They're going to re-traumatize this girl, which means that her mother is now, how is she needs to go to specialized trauma therapy to deal with this because she can't leave the house. But how's she going to go to the specialized trauma therapy? In which methodology is she going to use to get there? It's an inner city area in which the majority of people are going to travel by public transport, use their own 2 feet, and cycle a bicycle.
It's
How are
over
you getting
policed.
there?
It's an over policed community.
And it's an over police community. And therefore, how is she going to get from point A to point B to get the help she needs? Because when she sees a police officer, she's going to react in that way. And the police in that area, I'm sorry to say, but that's just my lived experience of living in the borough. I grew up there. That's where I lived. That's my home, right? They will chase you down. If they catch that's what you're doing, if they even see a whiff of that kind of behavior, and that's trauma that she's experienced, they're going to re-traumatize that child. That's why I started rocking. I started rocking because I started having a panic attack on her behalf. How is she supposed to get the help that she needs? She can't leave the house because her mother knows, I know, if she sees a police officer, that's going to happen. Okay, but those police officers are going, unfortunately, to treat her like a criminal.
Right.
So how is she supposed to get the help she needs? How is she supposed to maintain a normal life? She lives in an area that's over policed. How is she? No, man. No.
Right. Look, Daniel, you're right. You know, the difference between me and Child Q is that when I see the police, I scream something at them. I don't scream because I see them.
Yeah, the problem being, of course, that we realized on the earlier law that you would be arrested. Okay, so we don't do that. So let's not overstate the case. You're screaming at no police officers because you'll get arrested. Thank you very much.
I'm
Hold
all
your
right with that.
All right.
I'm all right with that. So you were, what was that?
I said you're a father of 3. You are not all right with that.
Okay. Listen, I done told you.
Anyway.
Right.
I need to pray for me, yeah. Put your praying hands up in this space.
What was that?
I was talking to our viewers. I was having a small communication with the people that watch along with us.
Listen, I done told you. look, you take it too far, anybody can get these hands. Right. So you were talking to me about schools, and what I was saying to you was that there is no legal obligation to inform the parents. And the report does remark on this and say that schools should, but there's that loophole that there is no legal requirement for them to do so.
Now I'm remembering actually my responsibility as a teacher, so I had to dip back into my memory here for this, and I remember why there is no responsibility to inform parents, of course, and this is to do with cases of abuse. So the rule exists in order that you can report a suspected abuse case to social services or to the police without having to inform the parents first, so the parents don't cover up, hide, remove evidence, so on and so forth. So the point being that there can be an investigation before you get, not so that you can abuse the child. That's not the point of the law. Wasn't created, or that rule wasn't created to hide your abuse of the child. The rule was created so that for children who were abused, they had a safe way that teachers had a safe way to report that abuse, and it could be investigated without cover-ups, etc., etc., etc.
So schools were also not required to inform parents before a search takes place,
No, Bridget.
right?
All that right there.
And there is no legal requirement of a school to keep a record of this search,
Excuse me?
right? And one of the recommendations of this commission is actually no, records need to be kept of what is happening, right? So yeah, as I said, the legal requirements to inform parents, yeah.
So Daniel's asked, why must y'all horrify parents weekly? Can we come into the light next week? This is the dark side. There are days when I'd like to come into the light, but sadly we're on the dark side. That's all I can
Listen,
say.
I'd like to make some people in this world see the light, or lights, plural. Take your pick.
Listen,
I'm good with either.
you mind yourself. You stop stop it. Stop it, you. Y'all put praying hands up in this thing, right? You shh.
Listen, everybody, you can put praying hands up for me. I'll take your prayers, and I'm going to put my hands up.
Anyway, final points on this case so that we do child Q justice, of course. I know we're trying to give ourselves hope in the midst of darkness.
Right. So this is one of the recommendations of the report and the commission that actually I take issue with.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's feasible or practical.
Okay.
So what they say is that child Q was quite possibly compliant with the police because she took a dare-like stance. So what that means is that typically responses are to fear or to threats or fight, flight, or fright. And what they say is that there's actually another one, which is the dare response, which is that you seek to please what you see as a threat, the person that you see as a threat.
No, I think it's likely she complied because it's a police officer in authority. It's not seeking to please. You're a minor. What do you anyway,
Right.
finish
Okay.
your
So here's the thing, right? Yes, because there should have been an appropriate adult there to advocate for her. But what we're talking about essentially is the human response to how do you deal with a threat. And what
Right.
the saying is, she responded in the way that she did, which is to go along with what she was told and not to challenge it because it doesn't seem to be a real challenge to what was happening, because she was scared. She did not
Right.
believe she had another choice.
Right.
So in order to protect herself, she complies with what she is told.
Right.
Right. So yes, they're not saying that she's at fault here. They're saying that this
afraid.
explains her behavior. She's afraid.
Somebody in authority is telling her to do something. She is following their instructions because she's afraid.
Right. Now, what they're saying is that part of the problem is that perhaps she didn't know her rights. Okay. And that one of the things the report does is said that more education needs to be done to teach children about their rights. Now, here's the thing.
Oh,
I
I have a
don't
problem with
I
this.
don't I don't in essence have a problem with you telling and educating people about their rights. The problem I have is that regardless of whether she knew her rights or not, the police showed that they were willing to ignore those rights,
Go
right?
on.
Because they still strip searched her. There was no appropriate adult present. You
They
didn't
didn't
bother to
follow
run
the
it up
chain
the
of
chain of
command,
command, right?
right?
So you've shown that you're willing to ignore the
Not
processes
willing,
in
that you
place.
did ignore.
Yes, but to protect her rights, right? So you were willing to ignore everything that was put in place to protect her rights. But the other thing is that we have seen what happens when people try to educate people about their rights. Because we did a story not too long ago on the dark side about this doctor that was trying to educate
In the
young
same
black
borough,
children
from the same police
about their
station,
rights, right?
same borough, same police station.
So she's this doctor that we spoke on saw a young child, and this is what happened. It was a young child
Yes?
whose rights were being violated, and she gave the boy some information about what rights he had whilst being stopped and searched by the police and questioned by the police. And they arrested her. And what did they do to her?
They strip searched her and abused her and carried on like they were crazy. I'm just trying to get her name for you because it incenses me. Hold on. I'm trying
Right?
to get this woman's name.
So I'm like, it doesn't matter whether you educate people about their rights or not. They're still going to violate those rights. And there's
Episode
a good
3.
chance that the people who are educating them about their rights are going to be violated.
Episode 3. Dr. Constantia Duff, professor at
Yep.
philosophy at University of Nottingham. It was episode 3 for anyone who wants to go back and watch what happened in that case. Same police station, same borough, same police station, same network. That's what happened. So, you know, the other thing which you haven't said, I don't know if you're coming to, is this. You want to educate the young person, the child, about their rights in the hope that the child would then be responsible for their rights, because
Mhm.
that's what you're effectively saying. That the child who has no power of authority, has no right to vote, can't change any laws, can't do anything, is a minor and is in at the mercy of the adults around them, has to be responsible for telling you, the police officer who has authority, that they have rights. No,
Yeah.
it's not the minor's responsibility to know their rights. It is every single adult around their responsibility, particularly the police, to know the rights of the child, not the other way around. Let's not get that twisted. You can educate my child about the rights that humans have. Absolutely. They'll one day be an adult. They need to know. Absolutely. It is not a child's responsibility to tell the adults, this is what you need to do to look after me and keep me safe. By the way, please don't strip search me. Please don't embarrass me like this. Don't humiliate me, dehumanize. That's not her responsibility. You should have known better.
No, it's not her responsibility, but unfortunately, it is her reality. I see this the same as Black parents having to give their children the talk. Unfortunately, you have to be vigilant. You have to, as unfair as it is, be the responsible party in this situation. It's also why the NWA is the mantra by which I live my life. You know,
I'm glad
the
that you
rea-
have other mantras, like love gods, love humans. I'm glad that those things, Christian mantras, actually are also what you live your life by. Just saying.
yeah, yeah,
Just saying.
yeah.
Well,
Listen,
the thing is, I understand the point that you're making, and I do understand the point that you're making, but I am always going to stand on the side of our children are not responsible for the adult behavior around them. We had an innocent thing happen today, which is that the children and I were watching Cheaper by the Dozen, the new Cheaper by the Dozen movie that Disney have done with Gabrielle Union. And in the movie, the twins, she has twin boys who are about 7, 8 years old, and she had bought them laser guns, and they love them. And they were about to go out into a white neighborhood at the pool to play with the laser guns. And she told them that the laser guns were only for inside the house. And the boy said, "But Mom, you taught us how to play with them. You bought them, blah, blah, blah." And she said, "I did. And that may have been a mistake. But you can never take those toys outside to the pool." So my children are watching this. And as they get to the pool, there are other children playing with the exact same toy, white children at the pool. So my children are watching this unfold. And I ask a simple question. Why do you think the mother does not allow her children to go to the pool with those toys? Says my eldest, "Oh, it's because they're black. They'll be seen with guns. They won't be seen with a toy." We don't even live in the USA, and my child already knows that. And at the same time, I'm going to stand with the child and say, it is not the child's responsibility to educate us as adults. The police have got to, it has got to change. It has got to change. It is not our children's responsibility to be holding you accountable for your behavior, to learn their rights so that you don't abuse them, you don't kill them, you don't shoot them, you don't take them out of lessons and sexually abuse them in a private room with 2 teachers standing guard on the other side of the door. Right. And then force child to do the walk back to the same exam room and pretend as if she hasn't just been violated. It is not her responsibility to put her life on the line to challenge you, because that's what you're telling her to do. If you are educating our children, you are putting them in harm's way because you police will do what you do. No, policing needs to change. Point.
Listen,
full stop.
Listen, I agree policing needs to change. I mean, for me, this is just incrementally better than telling women to flag down a bus if they're scared of a police officer. Because once again, you're putting the responsibility on the victim.
Again, Met Police.
So
again, the Met Police. Same police stations we're talking about.
As I said, here's the thing. As I said, I'm not opposed to them learning this. The problem is that at the same time you are saying that they need to know their rights, there needs to be greater emphasis placed on the training of police officers to recognize and uphold those rights. So that if I challenge you and say, no, this is my right, you know this is my right.
Well, there needs to be greater emphasis so that I don't need to challenge you. There should be no need of a child challenging police officers to what their right is, because you as police officers should be going extra, doubly, triply hard to protect the child. That's the reality. You should be working harder to protect the child.
Absolutely.
No matter what the case is, that is a child.
Yes, absolutely. But as I said, we've spoken about a lot of things. And one of the things is the criminalization and the adultification of Black children. And as a child, it was essential that I knew my rights. The amount of run-ins I've had with police since I was young. And I've had to challenge them. And it's because I knew my rights that most of the time they had to back off because I could challenge them. And so I think there is an importance in knowing your rights. I don't believe that it was fair that I was responsible for all of this, but it's still the knowledge of your rights does afford you some protection. It causes police sometimes to take a second to think about what they're doing and to take that step back. It doesn't work all the time, but it can help. The problem is that the police officers that I challenged knew that I was right. And this is why I'm saying to you, at the same time you're saying, violating your rights. This is why I said, the same time that you're saying there has to be teaching the children the rights, there has to be greater emphasis on the training and teaching of police officers so that they're aware of those rights. Because if you're not, you're just going to run roughshod over that person. But
And
the moment somebody challenges you and checks you on something that you are doing wrong, it's human nature to take that step back and say, "Oh, this person knows what I'm doing is wrong. Maybe it's not the best course of action to take." So that's why I'm saying it has to be a twofold approach. You can't just have children being
but
educated on their rights and then police not knowing them and ignoring them.
and in addition to that, there has to be a third approach, which is that for those police officers that willfully ignore chain of command, violate people's rights, there has to be a consequence to that. You can't hide behind your badge. And I think that final piece is really the linchpin on this, because we can train you to within an inch of your life. The fact of the matter is, if you break those rules and you are never held accountable, then therein lies the problem, because you will continue to break those rules and continue to ruin people's lives willfully and deliberately. What did those police officers learn that went in there and violated child Q? What did they learn? Oh no, they learned that the system protects them, that they didn't have to comply with the reporting, that there's an investigation being done by an official body and you did not have to comply. What does that tell them about the next time they're in there with another child? What does that tell them about the rest of their work within the police force? There shouldn't be an opportunity for the rest of their work.
Well,
There
we'll see
needs
because
to be greater controls and greater consequences to police officers that violate the protocols and rights of children and
yeah,
humans generally, but children particularly.
that was one of the recommendations and findings of the report was about the communication between the police and investigation, because I think they eventually did get the information on who was involved, but they had to go through a whole bunch of other bodies, and I had to get them liaise and fight to get the information so that this commission then get
You
the
have nothing to hide and you're
information.
doing the right thing. Isn't that what the police tell us all the time? If you have nothing to hide and you're doing the right thing, then what's wrong with giving your name? Or when the shoe's on the other foot, you don't want to give your name. It takes a whole entire army of people to get your name. But you want to tell the average person standing on the street, if you didn't do anything wrong and you are not guilty of anything and you're innocent, why wouldn't you comply? Well, here, the shoe's on the other foot. You were being investigated. Why wouldn't you comply? Oh, you don't want to comply because you did something wrong. But you want to go around and tell everybody who's innocent that we must comply because you have our best interest at heart, when you're not going to comply, when you violate the rights of the humans that you're supposed to be serving and protecting. No, come on now. Come on now. This is just nonsense.
So,
We have well and truly gone over time. And I'm still vexed. I'm smiling, but I'm literally seething. I'm just so vexed.
no, you should be. Look, that's what it is.
You know, the thing is, it isn't what it is, though, is it? It's
The
wrong.
beast is the beast.
It's wrong. It's wrong that this child has gone through that. I am glad to see that people have mobilized around the child. I'm glad to see that the communities are standing up. I know for myself that of course, it's my hometown, so I know people within the area that are campaigning, that are moving. I know the councillors that are standing on the street and they're doing the protests. I know all of these people that are involved in this situation. You know, I know the system, so I know that it's working. And I'm glad, because there were 23 other children whose rights were violated and nobody campaigned for them.
25.
25, right? Whose rights were violated and no one campaigned for them. We only got one. Child Q. There are 25 other families in this borough whose lives have been destroyed by this police service, and no one has campaigned for them because no one knows. Things were swept under the bucket, under the rug. They were swept away, and these children are living with these families are living with the consequences of the actions of the Met Police, of the Stoke Newington Police, of the police in Hackney. And that's only one borough. I dread to think what the results are across the country. Somebody asked if we do the light side. There are light side videos on my channel. that are concerned with other things. Sadly, we do the dark side every week because we think it's important to educate, to bring to the forefront these discussions so that people can be aware. It is not easy, particularly as parents, and that's why we take regular breaks from the dark side and we have vacations, because we do need to pause, because the constant stream of wrongdoing and trying to sift through as to which stories you're going to present each week is very difficult. It is not easy. And yes, there is a slight amount of, shall we just lock up our own family and children and not allow them out in the world? Because quite frankly, the world is not a safe place. That, I'm sorry, is a reality. That was for this comment of can we do something light next week? You know, if you send me a light suggestion, I'll do a light suggestion. If I can find a light suggestion, I will do one. There was one a few weeks ago. Didn't I have one? I swear I had one news story. I don't know where it was.
Anyway. Yep. Anything else you want to say?
Child Q. That's all I can really say. Child Q. I can't really say anything. I think her words spoke deeply enough for all of us. I think if you haven't read the report, please do. Please invest some time in doing that. If you can help with the campaign to change things in Hackney and beyond Hackney, which is a borough of London, please do. If you have suggestions for topics that we need to dig into, please send them. I can only pray for y'all this week because I need as much prayer, still reeling from this report and the frightening statistics out of my hometown.
All right, people. For me, well, as Daniel said at the start, NWA said it best.
Well, thank you for joining the dark side. TC Storm and myself are out. We will see you next week, 9 o'clock. We'll try not to go over by such a great margin of time. Nearly done to the 2 hours today. We're wishing you all the best for the week ahead. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback that you want to give, please do send that along. And if not, we will see you next week, 9 p.m. Central European time, and whatever that translates to in your time zone, or throughout the week as you catch up with us. God bless you. See you next time.